to our beautiful city Vilnius. It's worth to mention that it's nice to organize a discussion, especially this year, since Vilnius is Green Capital of Europe, and we are very proud of this title. And here we have top experts actually in the field of aquatic warbler, wetland conservation from all Europe. Today we are having a Café Scientifique discussion about which we called Aquatic Warbler, huge conservation efforts for a little brown bird, is it worth it? So I will ask Egle, could you please introduce us to the species, its biology, how it lives, where it lives, what is so interesting about aquatic warbler?
Long story short, the bird is very similar to the model here. The size and the shape and the colors is very, very similar. So it weighs 12 grams on average. One bird is, the weight is 12 grams. And when preparing for this introduction, I asked ChatGPT to give me an example of
this youth, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. This is the time, right? So I asked ChatGPT, I was like, give me an example of a thing that everyone knows that would match the weight, because you might not be able to grasp the size of the bird. So if we wouldn't have the model here. So it gave me some examples, and I think one of the more common and known examples were the piece of garlic clover, like that, you know, when you break it off for cooking. So on average it could weigh around 12 grams. So this is the size of it. So the interesting thing is that quite recently the bird was found almost across the whole Europe, and suddenly it started shrinking the places. And the reason behind that is because it lives in very, very specific places which are shrinking. So these are the natural wet meadows and fen mires, and they must be dominated by sedges. So sedges are very specific grasses. But this bird lives only in that area. And talking more about the bird and not the habitats and places where it lives, so you would normally not see it here somewhere in the middle of Vilnius. Yeah. Unfortunately, because we do not have fen mires here in Vilnius city. So in Lithuania, if you want to hear or see the aquatic warbler, you need to go to the Nemunas Delta. And there, during the breeding time, in late spring and summertime, you can hear the very charismatic and very specific song of this bird. So the interesting things about the biology of aquatic warblers are males have nothing to do with children raising. So males are only concerned about showing themselves off, singing a lot, and then obviously having as many mates as possible.
Easy life.
Absolutely
for
easy
fathers.
life. It's like it is easy. On the other hand, it's quite dangerous because they're always exposed. They're always visible, so they're more prone to be eaten by somebody like a hawk or a harrier or other flying predators. So. You know, it has some ups and downs, so the life is easy. You don't have to take care of the children, but, you know, you might get eaten, so, Though the females are, and by the way, males and females, they look almost identical. There's almost no difference in their looks, but females, so I heard multiple times that aquatic warbler females are the true epitome of motherhood because they raise their children alone. So they build the nest, they lay the eggs, they incubate the eggs, they then feed the chicks, which can be from 5 to 6. So imagine you having 5 children and you need to feed them like every half an hour because they're constantly hungry and they're growing like rapidly because once they hatch from the egg, it's only like 16 to 18 days and it's almost done. They're fledged, and they leave the nest, and then females still help them find the food. But they spend another 2 weeks together with their mom, and then they say, it's like, okay, so long, thank you very much, Mom. And the mom says, okay, so I finished what to do now, I still have some time. Let's find another mate, or maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, because one nest, one clutch of eggs can be from 3, 4 or 5 different parents. That's easy life as well, right? I mean, like,
very sexual species.
Very much, fathers, from different fathers. So the males have these this easy life because they are looking for as many females as possible, like mates. But the females are not very different from that as well. So they have this very interesting life. So in one nest there can be 5 chicks, and they can each be from different father, which is wild when you think about it.
Very diverse family.
Very diverse family. But when you think more deeper, the biology of the bird, because it can control where the sperm goes, in which you go, you don't go, you go, and you go in this egg, you go in this egg. It's like, it's wild, it's crazy. How can you do that? But they do that, and it's like, it's fascinating, it's fabulous. So the female, once it raises the first brood, it says, okay, I still have some time, why not raise another one? So she goes again looking for partners, and then she builds another nest. She then prepares, lays another batch of eggs. She then raises the chicks again. They finish the whole cycle, and they say, okay, we finished, and we go to Africa because it's gonna be cold, no insects, because these birds, they feed exclusively on insects. Probably Žymantas would debate that, but let's say they feed exclusively on insects, and mostly various mosquitoes, midges, anything that we don't like. Grasshoppers, those horseflies, the ones that are very scary and they bite very painfully. So they eat those. So if you want to be in the Nemunas Delta without these pesky insects, which are annoying everyone, protect the aquatic warbler, because they are notorious eaters of those insects. So because it becomes too cold in the winter, then they start moving across Europe, and usually at the border, through the other wet areas. So they always stop over to feed and strengthen themselves in areas very similar to where they naturally live and breathe. And they move to Africa, and they live there for the whole, I would say, autumn, end of autumn, winter, and beginning of spring, because they return here only in May. So they, how did you call them? It's sex tourists, yeah. So the aquatic warblers are sex tourists in Lithuania, and the comparison of Vilnius as a G-spot in Europe. Everyone knows, nobody knows where it is, but everyone likes it, right? So it's something very similar. The problem is that aquatic warblers are not here in Vilnius. So yeah, that's kind of the introduction about the aquatic warbler, the fascinating bird, which has a very sexy life.
Thank you, Egle, a lot. Žymantas, I saw that he's eager, sitting on the edge and wanting to comment. So Žymantas, please comment.
Of course, I want to defend aquatic warbler males. I mean, it was a very female perspective. We're talking about the motherhood and so on, and saying that males are having an easy life, just singing and kind of doing nothing, and it's easy. It's not easy. It's a really hard thing. Males are really males of aquatic warbler have to think strategically. So they are responsible for strategic thinking. They are living in a special habitats which are often exposed by catastrophic events like floods. For instance, in Lithuania, on the Nemunas Delta, if we had a western wind blowing, it can in half day flood hundreds of hectares, and all the females with a brood, or all the broods, all the nests will be lost, will die. So the males have a responsibility of being strategic and have a task to multiply as much as possible when there is a good condition, and get ready to spread the genes, get ready for the hard times, for another catastrophic event. So it's a really, even they are very strategic, they don't have a big brain. They have big but they do have a big testicles. So I mean, they're thinking with the testicles. If you really look into...
Think with the testicles.
Obviously, I mean...
Well, that's very male perspective.
Absolutely, and I mean, if you really look, but seriously, I mean, you're talking about such a small bird, 2/3 of the body weight is the testicle weight. So 2/3 of the body of aquatic warbler is the testicles, and if you would imagine the human, so I mean, the testicles would be like a watermelons, more or less. I mean, but seriously, it is really I mean, they have a task to and this is how to say, a copulation with different females is a strategy. It's a strategy for survival, to live in such spaces which can be catastrophic because of the climatic events and so on. And it is really a hard work. I think when they have a copulation and mating with a different, I mean, singing and copulating or having sex is really hard. I think they have some, I think Carl Schulzhagen in his paper, he has been studying the sexual life of aquatic warbler, and I think they're copulating like 6 times.
Up to 45 minutes.
And up to 45 minutes. I mean, how many of you guys can handle 45 minutes? And you say that this is easy? Every day? No. So, sorry. So, it's not an easy life. It's really very strategic, very hard, but also a pleasure life, of course.
So we had the female and male perspective. Then we will have professional Martin's perspective about the bird. Can you please maybe tell us more about? Agla already started talking about this migration and population itself. How does it live, Martin? And you studied a lot of. You were on expeditions in Morocco recently. Can you tell us a bit more about the species from this perspective?
Yeah, Franz knows much more about migration than me.
Okay.
So
he will correct you.
go ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
And population, how it's doing in the world that we live.
Yeah, I think I would start with this.
Okay.
So in the journal, in the very important Journal of Ornithology, where Franz is the chief editor, there are some papers from 1910 to 1914.
Before my time.
Oh my God!
Already
I was
before.
somewhere in the heaven.
Describing the wetlands in northern Germany, and we had huge areas of such peatlands, hundreds of square kilometers, which are all gone now, all drained. And in these wetlands, the aquatic warbler was really common. And this is described in his journal. So it was the one of the 2 or 3 most common species in these wetland areas in Germany. Yeah, but it was not well known by people because nobody was going to these wetlands. They are so uncomfortable and swampy, and mosquitoes and horseflies. So there are only a few fanatic ornithologists who dare to go in such wetlands. So, and during the 20th century, has disappeared completely. From Belgium, from the Netherlands, from Germany. Last aquatic warbler breeding probably was in 2014 at the Polish border.
In Germany. It was an extinction in Germany.
Yeah. So, and if you look over the global population, we estimate that it declined by 95% in the 20th century.
So we stand 10 people and 9 of them.
9.5.
Okay, we only have half person left. Okay.
Yeah, and when we searched for the last remaining populations in Belarus in 1995, successfully, and in Ukraine. Then later in Russia, but without success, and in Western Siberia with small success, but they have also gone in the meanwhile. These last remaining populations were protected quickly. In Belarus, within 2 years, they protected these sites. And then there was a period where the population seemed to be rather stable, on a low level, but stable. But since 10-15 years, it declined again steeply, supported by droughts and global warming, we can say. So we have a very serious problem. So we are at a very low level. Maybe it's the lowest level of population since tens of thousands of years. And that's the point where we are. And I have to say, Lithuania, Vilnius is not only the green capital, but Lithuania is the only country out of 4 which still have aquatic warblers, where we had an increase of the population in the last 15 years. So it's the green.
Our guys are doing really strategic job.
But the other fact is that it is only 5% of the population. But this 5% is in a positive trend. So, and it's your achievement. And
So we have in 4 countries. Which countries do we count?
Poland, Ukraine, and Belarus. They have 1/3 each, and a very, very small proportion is in Lithuania, but in a positive trend. And everybody wants to learn from Lithuania how to do that.
Elaborating more about, we talked about a lot about the species, and you see the flags outside the bar which we brought. We say that aquatic warbler is not only interesting of its ecology and biology, it also scientists has this umbrella species, this code. Can you, Martin, maybe elaborate what does it mean umbrella species, and why do we say species do not go extinct alone?
So it's a representative of this type of wetland. So it's the only species which is completely specialized in this type of wetland. And it's the only endemic bird species.
What does it mean, endemic?
Continental Europe. It exists only in Central Europe, on the whole globe. So normally endemic species occur on islands in the Pacific Ocean, or don't know, in Southeast Asia or something. But we are in a big continent of Europe and Asia, so it's a huge continent. And it's very amazing that there is an endemic species just within this huge continent in Central Europe, and there's the only one. And we say that the aquatic warbler is the ambassador of such Fenmayas. And more, these Fenmayas have been drained widely in the 20th century because they are easy to drain. They have a shallow peat layer, so it's very easy to drain it. It's more easy than with the raised bogs with 10 meters of peat layer or 50 meters.
I will just use, Lithuanian terms. Raised bog is aukštapelkė and Fenmar is žemapelkė. So just to be familiar with the terms.
I didn't know that.
Now you know?
Since a few years, since 10, 15, 20 years, we know that peatlands, wet peatlands are extremely important as carbon storage. And when they are drained, they imitate greenhouse gases in huge amounts. So 20 to 30 tons per hectare carbon is every year, per year, is emitted into the atmosphere. And so we have to stop this process. We have to stop we have to re-wet the mayas to stop the greenhouse emissions.
So it's not only aquatic warbler then?
To stop global warming. And this is an important factor. And so the aquatic warbler is also an ambassador for the protection of these wetlands and to save these wetlands. It got huge political importance without knowing it, of course, in the last 20 years. And I think that's the importance of this species.
Okay, thank you a lot, Martin. Žymantai, we talked now a bit about the species, why it is important. Can you elaborate from our topic, the efforts? What these crazy scientists that are not afraid of biting mosquitoes are doing in Fenmeyers in order to save it? And why you say so much efforts?
Yeah, I think that first of all, I'm thinking about what is our job, what we do is primarily we are dealing with the habitat restoration, so we are restoring the habitat. So quite a lot of areas of aquatic warbler are either abandoned, and because it is not comfortable to mow or to drive with the tractors in wet areas, or they are very intensively used, or they are drained. So the experts of aquatic warbler, they are restoring the habitat by introducing mowing, special mowing there, raising water level, removing bushes, opening the... Being a climate expert, as Martin said, I mean, it's not only about the biodiversity conservation, but aquatic warbler experts are also saving the planet from the climate change, and so we need also to be the cross-sectoral experts. So, and there is a really huge effort. I mean, when we talk about the raising water level, the hydrology management, we have to understand these things, and so there is a lot of competencies involved. Beside the habitat restoration, as I said, the aquatic warbler males are very strategic males, having a very devoted mothers. So they agreed to have 2 broods. So they have two nests in a year to breed, and they need a long time for that. And these are usually wetlands, grasslands used for farmers. And in order to so it is so rare bird, if you put the old biomass of aquatic warblers into one piece, it will probably now be more lighter than one leg and a half of African elephant. So it's and it is 200 times more rare than African elephant. So because there are so little amount left, we need to make sure that both nests in a season are successfully bred, which is a late mowing. So they need to, the mowing needs to happen in Lithuania, in Nemunas deltas after 15th of August. And of course farmers are complaining and saying, okay, my cows do not eat trees. I mean, what kind of hay you have in 15th of August? So what we have to do, the aquatic warbler experts have to do is really, we need to find a solution what to do with the hay. So we need to become economists, and we need to become entrepreneurs. What can we do out of this? And there are a lot of very nice products developed, packaging, building material, or pellets for the horse bedding, or the bedding for the cats, in the cat box. And this is that's the only case when the bedding pellets used for the cats. That's the only case when the cat becomes friend with the bird, if they use the pellets of aquatic warbler.
Because otherwise cats eat the birds. So explanation for not
talking about the cats, the biggest threat in the world on the birds is agriculture as a sector, on the first place, and the second place is cats. So it is really a problem for the birds in general. But so we really need to find the solution how to deal with the biomass. What can be, how the biomass can
be used. Where to put grass after cutting.
Where to put grass. The other thing is, because it is so difficult situation with aquatic warbler numbers, we have developed the aquatic warbler translocation method. So we moved the nests of 5 to 7 days of age with chicks to one place, into a new into a new home, into a new area which has been abandoned but being restored. But Aquatic Warbler doesn't know yet, so we need to put the birds there. And expert needs to rear the chicks, so we need to look. I mean, and then when we males becoming, not only males but of course females, but we are also becoming devoted mothers for the big family of 50 chicks to look after, which means so you can imagine the efforts in the translocation. The calendar is you wake up before 4 o'clock in the morning. You start feeding chicks at 4 o'clock or 4:30, depends on the area. You have to feed the chicks, and you have 50 of them, and they need to get food every 5 minutes in the beginning. So we need to get insects every 5 minutes, each of them. And this all routine is ending around 9-10 o'clock in the evening, non-stop, so no coffee break. So you have no beer break. And you have really, when you finish the last one, you have to start with the one. So it is really basically non-stop feeding of the chicks. And as Agle rightly mentioned, we are feeding with the insects. So there is a separate team of people who are catching the insects. Really a group of volunteers who are catching the insects, sorting them, preparing them for the guys, for the feeder. And we really need to take care about the health and so on. It is really, and this is lasting. This year we made a translocation in Žuvintas. We left our offices, our homes, we left our families around 20th of May, and we returned back around 10th of July. So on that period there is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, non-stop really care. So it is really terribly exhausting experience. And to put this into thinking about what are the efforts that we, Aquatic Warbler experts, we have to be, besides these physical efforts of translocation, or besides the physical efforts actually being in the wetlands, lots of mosquitoes and bitten by the mosquitoes, we need to be nature conservationists, we need to be scientists, we need to negotiate with farmers to postpone the mowing, and we need to think about agri-environmental measures, how the farming payments needs to be done. So we need to be agronomists as well. We need to be social workers and the negotiators to talk with the farmers. We need to be business entrepreneurs to think about the biomass, how it needs to be used. We need to be really strategically thinking, especially when we talk about the migration and the connectivity of the habitat. So it's not only in the breeding sites. I just mentioned a glimpse of the work we do in the breeding sites.
You mean those 4 countries that only
Yes.
left?
But then the Aquatic Warbler travels. So it goes to the wintering site, 6,000 kilometers roughly. Yeah. So it goes and it migrates. In the migration journey, it needs fattening, so it needs to get calories, so they can reach the wintering place. So it is extremely important to make sure that not only the breeding places where they have fun, as
where the sex tourism is happening,
yes, but there should be also these habitats secure on the journey. You talk about Netherlands, France, Belgium, Spain, Morocco, and then we go to Senegal. So we need also to cross Sahara and Senegal, and we need to make sure that the habitats are also in a good shape on the journey. So we have a lot of people from the migratory routes operating there, and it is really a hell of a hard job to do, and a lot of adventures. I don't know when we talk about the strawberry fields, but just imagine. I mean, Martin has been studying, giving some antennas on the birds, and from antennas they were able to record where they migrate and travel. And on the way back, the birds needs to cross Sahara from Mali, and that we need to do in one go. And this is non-stop travel for 50 hours flight.
Maximum.
Yeah.
Maximum.
Maximum. Yeah. But so, and this is, we're talking about 12 grams bird, and the bird is really totally exhausted after the crossing Sahara. it needs to gain the fat back, and this is a stopover site in Morocco. And when Martin and others traveled there, they discovered that actually those territories in Morocco are not anymore fen miners. They are becoming the strawberry fields, where strawberries are grown for us, for Europeans, so we can enjoy strawberries in winter. So this is really a tragic story that happened. And if we have these strategically important stopovers extinct, then we have a risk of losing the species from the planet. We can also understand that the farmers in Morocco or farmers in Senegal with the rice fields and so on, they also want to live good life. They also want to not only have a bread and butter, but something more probably. And we need to give them alternative. We need to think about how they can replace their farming activities and save aquatic warbler, but also live a decent life. So it is really a very complex and complicated puzzle to put together into the system. And not to mention that aquatic warbler is also the bird of the war zones. 2/3 of the aquatic warbler population breeds in the areas which are the war zones. It's Ukraine, and it's Belarus also considered also affected by the conflict. Not only that, let's talk about Mali and the civil war. So it is really extremely complicated to do the conservation work in the areas which are affected by war. So we really need you need really to be courageous to travel to Mali and to not to be beheaded in this conflict. Yeah, I think French people are eager to do that. So, but this is really a risky thing. When we are traveling now to Ukraine, in our project sites, we see all these fences, all these blockades against Russians, and it is emotional also.
So to sum up the conservation efforts, we ride tractors, we restore wet grassland, as we call it, like wet fields. Then we translocate, we move birds. And we have to do that in not only 4 countries, but all the way Europe coast, and then some actions in Africa, and then there is a pressure of climate change and the farmers there. Whew, it seems quite a lot of efforts, right? Franz, can we go to is it really worth it? So many people, so many minds, so many research involved. Why?
Yeah, it's very worth doing, and already mentioned by Martin, it's an umbrella species for not just a particular site, but it's for many other species, including plants, of course, in these peatlands. And if we conserve such a charismatic species, which can be an ambassador, as mentioned, then we can really do something serious for our peatlands and for our wetlands, all along the migratory routes. And if it comes to migration, for example, just to add a little bit on the physiology, for similar species like sedge warblers, we know.
Sorry, Lithuanian.
Of course, yeah. So they are able to cross the Sahara. They have to do it in one continuous flight, more or less. They are able to do so only if they can fatten up properly before migration, before they encounter the Sahara Desert. And we know from similar species that they build up body reserves, fat reserves. They double their body mass within 3 weeks. And this is necessary at a particular site close to the desert before they take off across the desert, either in autumn or in spring. And think about yourself. You should weigh twice what you are doing at the moment in 3 weeks from now. And this is a challenge for these birds.
A lot of beer.
And beer is not enough, I can tell you. And this is a real challenge for stopover site protection. It's not just the habitat itself as a green plot. We have to have a quality in there regarding food availability for these birds to be able to fatten up in such a short time, in such a tremendous amount. And it's not just fat because of the energy you mentioned. With fat on board, they do have their water bottle with them as well. Because if birds and we as well are burning fat for energy, then we establish also it produced water, and this water is sufficient to provide the water supply for continuous flight as well. So
who's storing water bottles somewhere?
It's not water. What they store fat, and within the fat there's a water, the so-called metabolic water, the need for successful migration. And
like camels.
Like camels, they do similar, exactly. This is why it's so important to focus on non-breeding sites as well, in particular subover sites. It's even more crucial as compared to wintering sites. This we have to have in mind. But coming back to your first question, it's a very vulnerable species. It's it's the rarest songbird we have in Europe. It has been mentioned that it's an endemic. Therefore, we have an enormous responsibility as Europeans to protect that species. And that species is part of the ecosystem, which is a very sensitive ecosystem. And we do not know exactly the particular role of that particular species in that ecosystem, but you can compare it with a building. Buildings are built of bricks. You can take one brick off or two bricks off, and nothing will happen. But if you take further, then the entire building will collapse. And this is exactly
and in this comparison, Aquatic Warbler is maybe a roof?
Not necessarily a roof. It's one brick in the building. One brick in the building. And you never know which brick is the most sensitive for collapsing the entire building. And therefore we have to protect each element of such an ecosystem, particularly such a sensitive ecosystem like peatlands are and the wetlands are in general. Therefore we have a huge responsibility to maintain these lifestyles.
Okay. Thank you. That was the introduction. Maybe some applause for the introduction. And now, the main part of the discussion. I really want some questions, remarks, whatever. I remind you that there are 4 gifts for the most important, for most interesting questions. So feel free to ask questions. We have one microphone over there, so you should need to come closer if you wish to raise a question. So any questions? All right. So I will be faster with mine.
I believe that Baltic Environmental Forum did amazing and doing amazing work in regards to environmental protection. The question comes to my mind that it's hard to, change mindset regarding farmers, and that it's not only financial incentives should be going forward, but emotional, environmental. At the moment, we are having subsidies from European Union, but sometime in the future, it's going to be an end. How do you think the mindset will shift towards environmental part from farmers to us?
Good questions, and just to remind you that farmers live in all countries, all the way, like in Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, so it's a relevant question, and also migration route. So, who do you want a question for all of them? Who wants? Martin?
I want to answer. We have 2 sites in Germany that are potential breeding sites for aquatic warbler. And in one of these sites we will do translocation in 2 years. And there's one main farmer who's farming his Galloway's cattle. And his father was reed grower, but now reed for thatching, for roofs. But it's not. Yeah. And there was a TV film from Arte. Don't know if you know Arte.
Yes.
It was made.
Company.
And it was made in Roswarov in Poland, where aquatic warblers have been translocated to Roswarov 2 years ago. And the filmmakers from Arte documented it, and all the work Jimantas has described. And then this farmer came to us and said, I would like to be part of the team. And that's what you said, there is no emotional emotional component. He was not asking for subsidies or for compensation payment. He wanted to be part of the team. I think that's exactly what you asked for.
I wanted to add, I think thinking about the question, I would look from two elements. One is economy, and the other one is relationships. So talking about the economy, it is a really interesting question. What happens when subsidies will be gone? We didn't think about that. We need to do strategic thinking about it, as well as aquatic warblers do their job. But I think that in that context, I think it is really important to know that, I mean, the farmers, they also need to live and they need to, get an income. And aquatic warbler management, according to aquatic warbler, basically means that the traditional way of income doesn't work. And this is why the payments are needed. And I would suspect that for the future, I think we need to think more about the alternative products. We now imagine that the grassland, the meadows, is a food for cows, and cows are doing milk, and when milk may turn into cheese and butter and so on, or we do some meat, and that's the way how the grass is used. But now activities, especially in Germany, we call this polyculture, developing different products, making the packaging, for instance, making construction materials from the grass, from wet grasslands, from peatlands, from aquatic warbler areas. Reed roofs is just one example, but they're really a spectrum of the products. And I think we need to understand farming differently. Farming is not only cheese making, but farming is only making a construction materials or packaging materials in the future, I think, or heating. Also, we are cutting forests to heat our towns with a biomass, but actually, and which is not really renewable. In a way, it can be considered renewable, but in order to cut it again, you need another tens of years to grow. Grass, you need to cut every year, and you can also heat Vilnius town with the grass. So we can also, so from the economic part, we need to think, but we need to look on the other products, so to make it beneficial for farmers. We also need to think that, okay, maybe payments from common agriculture policy will be gone, but they are coming so-called carbon credits. In the context of the climate change, they are payments paid from the private money to re-wet peatland and to store carbon. And for that, the farmers are receiving payments which are actually not smaller than these traditional payments. They are coming by so-called biodiversity credits, where also farmers might receive the payments for preserving biodiversity. So I think there will be some economic instruments. The other part is a little bit linked to what Martin said, and I would put the headline relationships. I think that we need to build culture around aquatic warbler, and we don't need actually to build, we need to remember about culture. If we think about Nemunas Delta, we have the whole culture of the meadow management, and there is really a deep cultural heritage. And if you think about like Lithuania, white stork, Baltasis gandras, the white stork, who is going to, the white stork is shitting on the roof, and it's not, it's not clean, it's not, but nobody is really harming the nest, yeah? So because there is a certain cultural relationship. And I think our task is also to show to the farmers the relationship with aquatic warbler. So it becomes like a white stork. We do have such farmers who are, because of the stories, because when we bring the stories about aquatic, we build a relationship. They say that we have to protect aquatic warbler because eyes of aquatic warbler are smiling, or because of the stories about the family life, about the devoted mothers, or the great guys, singing. So yeah, it's part of a culture, and I think this is also a very strong intention and motivation, actually much longer lasting intention to protect species because of values, because of a culture. I think this is a very strong, difficult to communicate, but a very long lasting motivation.
Hello, thank you so much for the presentation, it was great. I have two questions actually. One is really a lay person's question. What happens to the females during translocation, and can't you catch them and bring them with the chicks so they can carry on?
Very good question. So often.
Yeah, and quickly, could you elaborate a little bit more on the most troublesome or problematic sites on the migration route? A little more, or even on the Morocco strawberry fields. How are you coping and what are you doing with the farmers?
So thank you a lot for two questions. Regarding females, maybe Martin, you would answer no. So Žymantas, or Eglė, yeah.
So basically, no, the female cannot be caught together with the nest because that would be too much stress for the female and for the nest, and she most likely would abandon the nest. So that's not feasible. But what happens once the nest, so during translocation, the whole nest with the chicks is being removed. So this is, for the female, this is considered as predation. So let's say a fox came in and ate the nest, and that's it, the brood's gone. So for the female, it's just, or just like a flood, a sudden flood or a predation. So yeah, she might wander around for a day or two, reminiscing on the nest and the days with the chicks. But then she goes on with her life because their lifespan is quite short. They live 3-4 years only. They have a lot of work to do, so there's not much time to fret about the past.
Sorry, I should add that it's very important if we take these nests early in the season, because then the females have a second chance to replace the first clutch they lost, principally. It is very important that we do also translocation at the very early nests, because then the chance of repeating breeding is high. It's very important.
Thank you, Žymantas.
I just wanted, I really understand this question, and I really share the concern from between the line of the question. And when we do the translocation, I can also say that from our experience, this moment of taking the nest from the mother is a really very deep emotional. It is heavy with what we experience, right? Yeah. So it is really, there is something inside emotional, which is really very strong. But also, as rightfully Eglė mentioned, that they can be fox, they can be flood, and so on. We have also to understand, we understand death differently than the birds. For them, it's part of a survival strategy. They have more 2 broods in a year, and then, okay, you know, some is lost, and they carry on. We are having little amount of children, relatively little amount of children compared to aquatic warblers. So we are, I mean, we are cherishing our lives much more, and for them it is like a daily, not really a daily, it is a tragedy, but it's a really short-term tragedy. And if you really, you would really try to take aquatic warbler together with a nest, of course I agree with Eglė that it will simply abandon it, but I think it is so stressful that the birds, the adult birds, if they're caught, they can easily also get a heart attack and they just die immediately.
And another issue is if you translocate chicks, then these chicks have a sensitive period where they imprint on the release site. Therefore, the likelihood that they return to the translocated site is much higher as compared to taking adults.
The question was more concerned with you, the feeders.
The feeders.
I was more concerned with you, the feeders, not the feeders.
Ah, okay. Okay. I think one of the real important success criteria of the translocation is that you pack your interests and you pack your needs in a backpack and you think about the birds first. So you don't think really about your own needs. I mean, and then you need to think about the bird needs. You really need to steer all. You really need to know every individual. And so this is how to say. We are used to that. It is a really big effort. We are used to that, to forget our own needs and to devote ourselves entirely to the translocation. But it's not only us. I think that's also need to. I think it is also our families. I think it is a really big devotion of the family. The family members are part of the translocation by, you know, sending their husbands or wives to the 2 months being gone in a totally stress situation. So it is a really big devotion. And really thanks to my wife that she allows me to go, and also to the other families. Really, it is we are ready. So to do that, it's fine.
So Gimantas, can I add?
Yes.
But look,
So France and
Yeah, France first. France go.
No, basically, the reward is a released bird, a safely released bird. This is a reward for all the enthusiastic input these people are able to provide.
I was just about to add to the biology of small passerine birds. The most critical part of their life is the first year. If they survive the first year, they could live long enough, even more than 3, 4, even to 6 years. And in captivity, if you are raising the chicks artificially feeding, the survival probably is higher than in nature. But then when they are on their own, the first migration, that's the highest mortality of such birds. France can confirm that.
And we came to the second question about migration. If I remember correctly, the question was, what are the biggest challenges, problems across migration route? And I know 2 experts we have on migration.
So, last year in March, we visited the locations which were indicated by the geolocator data, where the birds arrive in spring after the crossing of the Sahara. We found mainly 3 situations which are not good at all. The first sites we visited have been in the Atlas Mountains, that were wetlands, reservoirs, river dams, and they were dried out completely. So the place where we had 2 birds for several weeks was completely dry. So there were wooden boats on the ground still, but no water anymore. The second situation was at the coast, so the most wetlands remained along the coast, but these are not more than 7 or 8, and they are all well known. Most of them are protected sites. And there we saw this conflict with the greenhouses. So there are huge areas covered with greenhouses now, like in southern Spain, but even bigger, I think. And vegetables and strawberries under plastic, and it's all irrigated with fresh water. And Morocco is a desert country, so they take the water from the wetlands. And this is really a very serious situation. The Moroccan colleagues told us, we were together with Moroccans, that there may be, in the last 30 years, 3/3 of the coastal wetlands have gone, are drained or destroyed. And I think it was a Moroccan colleague who said it, Mohamed Amezian. He said, Europe eats African wetlands. It was a very strange sentence, because we need fresh strawberries in February. So it's just the truth. But the companies who are growing strawberries there are not Moroccan companies. They are from Spain, they are from Belgium, they are from Netherlands, they are even from Germany. And they do investment there, and the Moroccans are working for them. So they are lucky when they get a job, a position to work there. But the gains are made by foreign companies. That's the second thing. So it's really alarming situation. And what's also important, these wetlands are mostly Ramsar sites. It's an international convention on the protection of wetlands, and it's focused on water birds which are on open waters and on mudflats. So different duck species, also globally threatened duck species and waders. And these species are not threatened yet, but the aquatic warblers are along the margin of these wetlands, where the greenhouses are. So they are just in between the greenhouses and the open water. And so they are more threatened than all the other species. And the third thing we found in the north of Morocco was that there are still wetlands which are not protected, that are suitable for aquatic warblers, which are filled up stepwise with rubbish and landfilling. Yes, so they are disappearing under such material. We have taken some impressive photos. And so there's action is urgently needed in Morocco because it becomes a bottleneck.
These stopover sites, particularly in the Maghreb area, Morocco and western Algeria, they are so important both for southbound migration, because these are the places where these birds fatten up for the southbound migration, and they have to be able to refeed there, to refatten there, to be able, after crossing the Sahara in spring, to be able to reach the breeding grounds. Without that refeeding there, they are unable to continue migration. We did a similar study in other species, and across various species we investigated there in Morocco in spring. Approximately only a quarter of them, of these individuals, would be able to reach Europe at least, but by far not be able to reach the breeding grounds. So they have to be able to feed there properly, and therefore we need habitats, we need proper habitat there, and this is so important. As I mentioned already, it's more important than the wintering grounds.
Okay, Gimantas wanted also to add.
Yeah, just when Martin tells his story, I somehow start being a little bit emotional, and because I remember just 3 weeks ago I was in Spain, in Doñana National Park area, and really a very beautiful park, really a very nice Fenmeyers from horizon to horizon, aquatic warbler habitat, home of aquatic warbler. And just other side of the road out of a national park, there are greenhouses of strawberries. And when I was going there, you know, it is sand. There are the stripes in plastic for placing strawberries, and you hear it is total silence. And in the silence, you hear this sound like, you know, this water spraying, thousands of the water sprays, and you really hear this like it's like Baraka movie, like around thousands of liters of water going to the sand, wasted, and it is really a big disaster. And it's not. And strawberries is one story, but the blueberries or shilauages, I don't know how to say it in blueberries, yeah, is even worse, because blueberries are perennial, so they need to be constantly wetted. With the strawberries, you wetten in a certain moment until you harvest, and then you replace it, and there is a certain break. With the blueberries, you need constantly to spray them into the sand, and then it is a huge social problem. And when I was driving, I made some pictures, because we are also thinking that we need to inform Lithuanians about what is happening. I was sneaking into the area with a camera, and there was a group of farmers, and They were looking in rather angry faces at me, but you really see different nationalities. The way how they live, there is a dormitory nearby, which is like a barn, and it is really a huge social problem for these people to live. It is really slavery what is happening there for our strawberries. And not talk about avocados. I think avocados is also another fruit which requires a lot of water, and they're really taking so much of water and spraying just into the desert. It is really disaster. Near the Doniana National Park, on the border, there is a town on the beach, a tourism resort. And local experts who were guiding us in Doniana National Park, we said that they're also doing this wetland water monitoring, water level monitoring. And when the tourism season comes, they see that on the monitoring data. They see that there is, when the evening comes and there is a time of shower, they see that the water level in the Maya is going down in the evening. So we really see that on the data in the Maya after like 15 kilometers away or 20 kilometers away, that the water level is going down because people in the nearby resort are using that water for taking the showers after the day. And this is really very sensitive. I think that these fen Mayas are very, very precious habitats there.
Just one point, these are no fen Mayas. These are marshes. There no peatland, no peat. Yeah.
So it seems that the greatest problems that you mentioned is in the southern route, like Spain before crossing Mediterranean Sea, and then the beginning before the Sahara. Yeah.
Sorry, nevertheless, we do need protection at the breeding sites in particular, because these are the sites of production. Without productive breeding sites, we can do anything what we like to do in Africa, we will not be successful. So we have to maintain the population at the breeding grounds and then compensate, of course, what's going on further on. But without doing proper protection at the breeding sites, we may fail anyhow. Therefore, it's so important.
Egg and chicken probably think on one side.
It's extremely important to be successful at the breeding grounds, have productivity, and then we have to counteract what's going on during migration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your efforts to help those wonderful birds to survive. Well, my question is, do we know something about wintering sites of those birds? Because as far as I understood, they are spending huge time on those wintering sites during their lives. It's Mali, Senegal, I suspect. What about those sites?
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, we know that since a few years that most aquatic warblers spend the winter in the inner Niger Delta in Mali, and some in Western Africa, and some surrounding river valleys. And one out of 20 birds went to Nigeria, northern Nigeria, we don't know where. And a smaller part spent the winter in Senegal, in the Senegal Delta. So the inner Niger Delta, it's a huge area. If there's a lot of water, it's nearly as big as Lithuania, the flooded land. In dry years, it's only 10% of it. But it's still a huge area which is big enough to host a few thousand aquatic warblers, so that's not the problem yet. It is threatened also by the construction of dams at the tributaries, the tributary rivers surrounded. So there are 2 existing dams and 3 more are planned, but at the moment nothing goes forward because we have the civil war situation. So it's a very unstable political situation, and it's also interesting, a big part of the inner Niger Delta was owned by Gaddafi, by the Gaddafi clan. By Gaddafi clan, because they know that they need wet areas for food production, to grow rice, for instance. And so some decades ago, they bought huge areas in the Niger Delta, but now you know what happened. Gaddafi clan doesn't exist anymore. So it's a little bit sarcastic, but as long as we have this unstable political situation, the civil war, there will not happen very big bad things. It will not happen at the moment. But you cannot also not go there. It's the other side of the medal. So, but this is the reason that we believe that the wintering site is not the bottleneck, as Franz said, but the spring stopover sites. Yeah.
Work with Aquatic Warbler is work to cooperate with people, with your neighbors. I particularly, I am living on the border with Belarus in the biosphere reserve called Western Polesie, which is trilateral. It was of course established in very nice, peaceful times 10 years ago, and it's contain the Ukraine part, so Szats National Park, then Bug River, which is border between Poland and Ukraine, and then also the border with Belarus. And we work a lot together with our Ukrainian and Belarusian colleagues during this time, and still we are in regular contact as well. But this is one example. We of course have another border, at least on the paper, and I am very happy that it's just a border and should be border on the paper, within the historical area called Jotvingia. In Polish Jadźwierz, I don't know how it is in Lithuanian, but anyway, it's contained from the Polish side, the main side of the Aquatic Warbler called Biebrza, and one of the most important sites in Lithuania called Žuvintas. It's all within Jotvingia wetlands. And we have also Narew river valley there as well. And of course, it is the matter of our cooperation with Professor Morkvenas, for example. And it is also some exchange of population. For example, in this year we have very severe drought and also big fire in Biebrza. So many birds escaped from this area and went to Žuvintas. And it is of course one of the way you can imagine. And of course Martin can tell even more, because Aquatic Warbler conservation team, which was established in Martin House in Brodowin in Germany, consists of people of every range country. So it is the platform of big friendship and cooperation in despite of the war. This is the good example how work for Aquatic Warbler is really important, just to establish cooperation and friendship among us.
Oczywiście.
Okay. Thank you, Jarek. Now we move to Latvia.
So thank you, Jarek. You forgot Latvia. But since you already mentioned that,
behind me.
Yeah, sure. Since you already mentioned that the Aquatic Warbler International Conservation Team was founded in Martin's house in 1998. So we are four, I would not call them Mohicans, because that's the last of the Mohicans, but we are the dinosaurs. And there are four of us. So Martin, of course, the first one, you, Zhidru Lasani. And it's hard to imagine, because next to me is sitting a colleague who has born in that year. Not only Arte has made a movie on Aquatic Warbler, but as I think a German television, Martin could more precisely tell, made a movie, Expedition Paludicola, where the Siberian expeditions and some of the expeditions also to Lithuania and Poland are documented. And those who are reconsidering the goals of their life or hobbies, I think everybody could take as a first hobby birdwatching, and then probably to join as a volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Gimantas wanted to add something.
On your question, is it worth it? You know, it's a very personal perspective, but let me tell you one story which I faced some years ago being in Australia in the International Translocation Conference. I met a very strange guy who turned to be a scientist on the turtles, and we were exchanging, you know, just having a mingle party similar like here and talking and drinking beer, and find out that he was working, or he's still working in the turtles, and he was working in China. And he shared his story with literally tears in his eyes. But he worked with the Yangtze turtle. He was one of the experts dealing with the Yangtze turtle, and the story is that there has been 3 individuals in the world left of Yangtze turtles because of the pollution and so on in China, in this Yangtze River. 2 males and 1 female. I think then 1 male died, 2 left then, female and a male, and they since they are not aquatic warblers and males are not so strategically thinking, they somehow could not make babies, and they decided to make artificial insemination. They put these 2 turtles together and nothing really happened. Female and the last male, and playing probably music, no chemistry. But actually it was not really a chemistry, it was a trauma. When they further investigated, they found out that this old male has broken penis. It is all functioning, but it cannot get into the right place because of morphological changes. And so they decided to make artificial insemination. So they put the female asleep, a narcosis, operators, doctors, and him. They put the insemination, you know, everything went fine, and female did not wake up. And that was the last female of Yangtze turtle. And when he was talking this story, I mean, I suddenly realized when we think about extinction or death, we think about death of individual. But it is totally different level when you think about death of a species. And when he said that everybody were shocked in China, I mean, the Chinese scientists did not dare to touch that dead female. They were so shocked, they did not know what to do. So they did not agree to touch, and of course, for him, for whole life working with the turtles, he never traveled to China afterwards. It was also a shock, and he went to the hotel and did not manage to sleep, and then middle of the night still woke up, returned back into the lab and make an operation. So he opened the female with his own hands to take the ovaries, so and to froze them in nitrogen in order to maybe to have a hope in the future somehow to bring the species back. There is another subspecies of the Yangtze turtle. I think there is still 1 more individual left, which is in Vietnam. But because Chinese and Vietnamese don't go along, so that is not really happening. So there is also international relationship. So I think that story for me is really a very personal perception. Is it worth it? Is it worth? It's not. Is it worth to save aquatic warbler individuals? Is it worth to save a species? And in his words, I really sensed a lot of purpose in the job what we also do, and I think this is really touching, and you can only understand that by experiencing it. And I really would like to invite also the guests here. Next year, come to Translocation in Vilnius. We need volunteers to catch insects, and then you will see closer what is happening and how the work is, and when all the questions will be answered very, very quickly. I mean, not that particular question, not all the questions, but that particular question, is it really worth it? When, yeah, some volunteers, I think Valeria has been there. I don't know, did it answer the question to you? You were in Žuvintas this year. You can maybe share your emotion. How was it?
So I started working on an aquatic warbler project this year. I was not familiar with the species before, if I can be fully honest. So you do all the logistics of the work, the administration, but then I was invited to go to Žuvintas to witness and also work, of course, at the translocation activities. And it was the first time for me to see the aquatic warbler. Of course, it's different to see it in the wild, but also to see it in the translocation process. And luckily, I actually got to see one in Žuvintas, actually in the wild when we went to the cages. So just as a first meeting encounter, again, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know the specifics, but I mean, you think like it's such a cute bird, it has a personality, you see all the hard work, and you immediately become like emotionally attached. I mean, not to sound so corny, but you do, and I think that's what you're trying to express, is that there is the emotional aspect, and especially again being new to this family, it makes an impression, one, knowing that there's been so much work being done for many, many years, but then it gives more motivation to the newer people to continue this hard work and just fight till we solve the problem. So I recommend doing the translocation. Also for other people in the project that I manage, encouraged to also volunteer, and I plan on being there next year again.
So just to close up our discussion, thank you a lot, all experts here, and all, random people who also came. Thank you a lot for that. I hope that you, in your head, formulated your answer to our question: is it worth it? Is it not? I hope it's more leaning to the worth. And once again, what Valeria and Žymantas mentioned. Please, you can sign up for our newsletter, which is in English, and the link is on the picture. And we definitely invite you to volunteer for translocation. So if you to get inspired, maybe Polish colleagues will also invite to Polish translocation, which is supposed to be happening also next year. So thank you a lot. Have a chat over the beer. Do not hurry up, and I hope you spent a nice evening with us. Thank you a lot.